All right, so the head of the so-called Congressional Progressive Caucus, Pramila Jayapal, recently got herself into a little bit of hot water in regards to her comments on the government of Israel, specifically labeling them as racist and an apartheid state. And we're going to get to that here in a second. But we also had a response from Congress, which decided to just randomly pass a piece of legislation, which is essentially just doing a circle jerk with the government of Israel. And we'll get to that here in a second. But first, I just want to lay out sort of the groundwork for you guys here in terms of like why this sparked off into the event that it has been. So on July 19th, here from the New York Times, they say Israeli president's visit of this guy Isaac Herzog, who is the president of Israel, obviously not the prime minister of Israel, which would be Benjamin Netanyahu and his far-right government. But Isaac Herzog decided to make a trip over here to the United States Congress, and they hosted him for a speech. And they say a handful of progressive Democrats boycotted the speech, and we'll get to that here in a minute, a day after the House voted overwhelmingly in support of Israel, with some notable defections. The treatment of Palestinians and proposed changes to Israel's judiciary have worried some Democrats. Okay, so that leads in to the statements that were made again by the CPC head, Pramila Jayapal, at this event that she was speaking at, where some protesters decided to show up, and she basically tried to speak to them directly. So let's just go ahead and get into this clip here real quick.
I'll just leave. Maybe I should just walk off.
Guys, can I say something? Can I say something as somebody that's been in the streets and has participated in a lot of demonstrations? I want you to know that we have been fighting to make it clear that Israel is a racist state, that the Palestinian people deserve self-determination and autonomy, that the dream of a two-state solution is slipping away from us, that it does not even feel possible. It does not even feel possible. And I want you to know that while you may have arguments with whether or not some of us on stage are fighting hard enough, I do want you to know that there is an organized opposition on the other side, and it isn't the people that are on this stage.
Okay, so there's a lot to say about that. I mean, first off, when she says that Israel is a racist and an apartheid state, that part of this, to me, should be, at least in a normal civilized society, should be completely uncontroversial, right? This is the position of the vast majority, if not the entirety, at least from what I've seen, of human rights organizations around the world, whether it's Human Rights Watch or Amnesty International or so many others that we could get into here, and I'm going to link some of those down in the description below if you actually want to go read more into the actual details of Israel's apartheid and their ongoing sort of like slow-rolling ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. But that aspect of that commentary is based, it is true, it is 100% accurate, it is based on the facts on the ground of the experience of the Palestinian people. But then she follows it up, obviously, by saying that we are still continuing to fight for this so-called two-state solution, which has been sort of like tacitly the pretend position of the United States government and the Israeli government, for that matter, for decades at this point. But if I'm being straight up with you guys, if I'm being entirely honest, a two-state solution is no longer on the table, not only because the governments of the United States and the government of Israel are not interested in an actual two-state solution, but also because of the actions of the Israeli government over the last number of decades that have made a two-state solution feasibly, logistically, entirely impossible. Okay, you cannot have a fragmented Palestinian population in the West Bank and what is effectively the world's largest open-air prison within the Gaza Strip that Israel is continuing to bomb, they are continuing to raid, etc., and expect that you are going to be able to create some sort of a two-state solution with Palestinians whose neighborhoods are consistently being invaded and taken over with these ongoing illegal settlements into the West Bank territory and the Gaza Strip, and expect that these, not even connected territories that have Palestinian people, that their, rights are being violated on a regular basis, that is going to be able to constitute an actual government or a cohesive state, as she says there. So Two-state solution, not exactly a reasonable position to continue to be holding at this point, and really the only feasible solution, if you ask me, is a one-state solution in which there is an actual democracy instead of a theocracy based on, Jewish identity within the region, right? That would be the actual solution that we would be calling for if we genuinely believed in democracy and human rights within the region. But of course, we are the United States government. We really view Israel more as a, like military hub or a geopolitical ally within the Middle East, an ally in the region that we can sort of project our own economic control, our own geopolitical control, etc. And so that's the reality of the United States-Israel relationship. I mean, it's completely different from how the rest of the world views Israel, and that is just because it happens to align with our own self-interest, at least from the perspective of the State Department, from the perspective of capitalists, etc. So now we get to this follow-up statement here from Pramila Jayapal, again, who, just as a reminder, is the head of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, okay? So she made those statements and she decided to effectively walk them back here. Now, I want to remind you guys, the Congressional Progressive Caucus has dozens and dozens and dozens of members within it that are by no stretch of the imagination actually progressives, because there is no standard to get into the Progressive Caucus. You have people like, Shontel Brown, who ran against Nina Turner, for example, up in Ohio, who accepted GOP donations, Republican donor donations from billionaires who are Republicans, who accepted AIPAC money, etc. Basically, anybody is allowed within the Congressional Progressive Caucus as long as you want to use the label of progressive to your own personal political career benefit. And so this is what we're left with here with the leadership. She says, at a conference, I attempted to diffuse a tense situation during a panel where fellow members of Congress were being protested. Words do matter, and so it is important that I clarify my statement. I do not believe that the idea of Israel as a nation is racist. I do, however, believe that Netanyahu's extreme right-wing government has engaged in discriminatory and outright racist policies, and that there are extreme racists driving that policy within the leadership of the current government. I believe that it is incumbent on all of us who are striving to make our world a more just and equitable place to call out and condemn these policies and this current Netanyahu government's role in furthering them. So already we're running into a pretty substantial problem here, which is the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu did not invent racism in Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu and his government did not invent apartheid in Israel. This is something that has existed for decades and decades and decades, okay? This is not a new phenomenon. I mean, this would be like saying, like, Donald Trump, when he was elected in 2016, created all of the problems with capitalism within the United States of America. It's like, no, he didn't create capitalism. He didn't create the problems of neoliberalism in the modern era. He was just sort of like a reflection of that, continued and in a more extreme way, in the same way that Benjamin Netanyahu is within Israel. Okay, so to walk back your initial statements here of the fact that Israel is an apartheid state, and that they have been an apartheid state even before Benjamin Netanyahu took power, right? And that they are a racist state at their foundation, right? We're talking about a theocracy, right? We are not talking about a democratic society. You cannot have those terms be synonyms with each other. They are at direct conflict with each other, and yet they want to have the best of both worlds. It is not a controversial statement to say that Israel is a racist apartheid state. This is the position of basically every reputable human rights organization around the planet. I mean, I can link this down below if you guys want to go look into Amnesty International, for example, or the Human Rights Campaign and their organizations' investigations into apartheid within the government of Israel. And we're talking about fragmentation into domains of control, as they point out here, dispossession of land and property, segregation and control, completely different laws for Palestinians versus Israelis, or Jewish Israelis, I should say, and deprivation of economic and social rights. I mean, we can go, line by line by line and actually dissect what exactly we're talking about when we reference Israeli apartheid. It is unambiguous, right? It is just because we live in the United States of America and we have these geopolitical, these economic ties to the government of Israel, that we completely deny this reality. And so now we end up with a response to not Rashida Tlaib, because she's actually usually pretty based on Israel, but Pramila Jayapal's statements there that we just watched. And here we have Congress deciding to put forward a bill. Put forward a bill, basically, again, just doing a circle jerk with the government of Israel. So here's the actual text of the bill. Concurrent resolution expressing the sense of Congress supporting the state of Israel. They say, number one, and this is the entire bill. I'm not even kidding. This is the bill right here. Resolved by the House of Representatives, the Senate concurring, that it is the sense of Congress that, number one, the state of Israel is not racist or an apartheid state. This is something our government decided to do. Now, obviously, history is not going to reflect well on these people. But I just want to make it perfectly clear right now in 2023, when we're 10, 15, 20 years down the line and people look back at this and they say, oh, how could people have possibly defended this apartheid state, right? I just want to make it perfectly clear. They are passing a piece of legislation saying Israel is not racist. They are not an apartheid state. This is our government. Are they delivering on universal health care for the American people? Are they raising the minimum wage? Are they cutting the defense budget, the military budget? Are they doing anything that is useful to your life? No. They are saying that Israel is not an apartheid state, which it absolutely is. They're saying Israel is not a racist state, which it absolutely is. I mean, listen, if it wasn't the case that Israel was racist or apartheid against the Palestinians, right, you wouldn't have to pass a fucking bill like this. I mean, it is absolutely deranged. I am genuinely I'm not shocked, but at the same time, I'm shocked, and I kind of want to be shocked because I don't want to believe that this is the country that we're living in, where this is a legitimate piece of legislation that has not only been put forward, but has been overwhelmingly passed through the United States Congress. But this is what they're passing here. Number two, Congress rejects all forms of anti-Semitism and xenophobia. So the classic, obviously, pretending as if criticizing the actions of the government of Israel is the same as criticizing Jewish people. Completely absurd. It's like saying that criticizing the government of Iran or criticizing the government of Syria or criticizing the government of Saudi Arabia is somehow Islamophobic. It's not. It has nothing to do with the religion, right? Obviously, people who have critiques of the government of Israel don't simultaneously push that against the actual Jewish faith or religion. I don't give a shit what religion that you subscribe to or what your ethnic background is or anything like that. I'm just against ethno states. I'm against an apartheid. I'm against an ethnic cleansing. Doesn't mean I'm against the Jewish people broadly around the world, but that's what they're trying to conflate here in order to try to protect our ally Israel. And they finish off here: the United States will always be a staunch partner and supporter of Israel. Always, regardless of what they do. So this is the bill that they decided to pass, right? We are going to support this apartheid state that is conducting a slow-rolling ethnic cleansing, that is committing widespread war crimes against the Palestinian people, illegal occupation, illegal expansion of settlements into the West Bank territories of the Palestinian people, and we are going to support them unconditionally. That is effectively what this bill is saying. And so, shocking, absolutely surprising here for you guys, but only 9 people within the entire United States House of Representatives, we're talking about hundreds of representatives here, 9 of them had the audacity, 9 of them had the balls, metaphorically the balls, to stand up against this ridiculous and absurd piece of legislation. And their names are, obviously, Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush, we had Carson here, we had Summer Lee, we had Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, we had Ramirez, and we had Rashida Tlaib, and then we had McCollum, who decided to vote present, and then 11 people not voting. But effectively, we had 9 votes against this completely insane piece of legislation. 9 votes. So I mean, on the one hand, obviously, credit to those people for actually voting against this piece of legislation, right? And then credit to some of the people who decided to speak out against this piece of legislation here. But let's just reflect on that for a second, right? 9 people, The vote was over 400 to 9 in favor of just completely whitewashing the reality of what the government of Israel actually is, according to every reputable human rights organization on the face of the planet. Okay, and that is the result. So now we get into some of the responses here. Bernie Sanders, of course, having somewhat of a good position on this, he decided to actually skip the statements here, or the appearance here by the Israeli President Isaac Herzog, and he says, quote, "It is no great secret that I strongly oppose the policies of Israel's right-wing anti-Palestinian government. We provide them with $3.8 billion in aid every single year. We have a right to demand that they respect human rights," and he is 100% correct about this. We also had a response here from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who gave a similar vibe here, so let's just go ahead and watch this.
I will not be attending. There's currently a crisis of democracy in apartheid. And I think that this is something that has been a consensus among human rights organizations.
Okay, so she's correct. She's correct again. We also had a statement here from Cornel West, who is obviously running a third-party Green Party candidacy for the 2024 election. He says the U.S. congressional resolution on Israel is a sham. The painful truth is that the Israeli state, like the USA, has been racist in practice since its inception. The founding of the Jewish state in response to the indescribable evil of the Holocaust against Jewish humanity produced dispossession and domination of Palestinian peoples. This sad paradox of how a terrorized and traumatized people for 2,000 years, precious Jewish people, renounced terror and trauma for precious Palestinian people, or reproduced terror and trauma for precious Palestinian people in the last 75 years, reveals our human wretchedness. Massive denial of undeniable evil numbs us to the suffering of others and justifies naked power over the vulnerable. The courageous and compassionate human acknowledgement and resistance to any form of racism and domination is our only hope. The two-state solution has been undercut by hundreds of thousands of Jewish settlers. Absolutely correct there, and I'm glad that somebody is willing to point that out. But they say a call for Palestinian dignity and justice and Jewish security and safety in a secular federated state with UN oversight is our best option. So, I mean, listen, again, not even remotely surprising that our government would do something like this. I don't put it past any Democrats. I don't put it past any Republicans. I mean, this is, again, very expected that this would, in terms of like the legislative outcome, the votes that were actually cast on this, it's not surprising by any stretch of the imagination, but it is also simultaneously extremely depressing for the reasons that Cornel West, I think, just elegantly laid it out for us there. So, I mean, again, I'll link it down below if you want to go read Amnesty's report, if you want to go read the Human Rights Campaign's report. I mean, this is unambiguous. Israel is, in fact, an apartheid state by any stretch of the, definition of what the word apartheid actually means. I think you could argue they are continuing a slow-rolling, sort of like decades-long ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. They were responsible for countless war crimes, not just within the West Bank territories, but also within the Gaza Strip, which, again, I think could be accurately referred to as the world's largest open-air prison. And that is a reality of one of our closest allies in the region, and what the United States pretends to call the only democracy in the Middle East. And I have some breaking news here for you guys, some absolutely shocking reports, but a democracy and an apartheid cannot be synonyms, okay? They're completely antagonistic to each other. Israel is an apartheid, therefore cannot be a democracy, and yet this is the country that we are not only sending billions and billions of dollars per year in terms of aid to this government, but we are also now apparently willing to go to the lengths that we are going to pass outright legislation declaring that they are not an apartheid state, declaring that they are not racist, which is just sort of like laughable at face value. And the best pushback that we have is just like 9 isolated members of the House of Representatives who are willing to call it as it is. And then we have the leadership of the so-called, again, Congressional Progressive Caucus that is essentially sort of like folding on this issue that should be forefront for anybody who actually gives a single solitary shit about human rights around the world.
Everyone is saying GoodPoliticGuy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying